Alright guys, this is going to be a video that covers the image types of modules at the tops of different pages of your websites. Specifically, we're going to cover the concept of sliders and how the sliders are working. Now, as you can see that this slide is going from slide to slide, it's automatically rotating between these beautiful photos. And one of the things that seems to be confusing people is how to manage and manipulate these. What are the different options that come with these as far as text is concerned? Does it have to be a straight photo? Can it be some infographics and things like that? And we're going to cover that. Now, as you can see here, this is a rotation of photos with some basic text at the bottom. This is kind of typical to what you're going to see. And when you look at the back end of your module, it's going to look similar to this right here, where it's going to say full width slider. And inside the full width slider, you're going to find the individual slides, which we'll cover in a minute. One thing to remember though, sometimes when we build pages, we'll only put one slide in, so it'll be static. It won't be switching from slide to slide. And we use the full width slider to do that, to make it easier for you down the road if you choose to add additional slides. It works just the same if it's a single slide or multiple slides. It just won't animate. So now let's take a look at some different options. Okay, so this one has some basic text on it. You'll notice in this one you have a static background and that it's not moving, but there's also another graphic up here on top, another image with some text, and then there's these three buttons down here. So there's a lot you can do to the sliders. Let's take a look at another. So on this one here, we have it consuming the whole page. And it's got some basic text over the top, and then it's going to go from slide to slide and allow the visitor to see everything in the images. Now let's take a look at this one here. So these are infographics, and what we're doing here is we're running slides with images on one side, and some of these images have the text built into it and some of them don't. But over here on the other side of the slide, we have text, description, and another learn more button so that people can click to go somewhere. Another option when working with slides is they don't have to be full width like this is here. You can set it up so that it's only half or a quarter. It's a module, so it can go into any one of the other columns, but you can put it in here so that the slides work just like it does in full width, but in half the scale. And this will also make your images half the size, which will be twice as fast to download, especially on mobile phones. But this is just another configuration option that's 100% available to you. So as you can see, there's a variety of different types of slides that you can configure for to get your message out or even a call to action. Now let's take a look at how that works. So we're going to jump over here to this test page. This is just a simple set of slides that rotate images back and forth, and we're going to make some changes here. Right now we're going to start with just basic photos in a slide. And the thing that you need to remember is that every image that you put on here is going to cause the page to be a little bit slower to load, especially on mobile devices that may be on sale. So you have to be aware of your file sizes before you start uploading a bunch of these. We recommend anywhere from 3 to 5 slides if you can get them down under 100K each. And sometimes that's a little bit difficult. I'm not going to get into the aspects of how to create the photography or the images, the infographics, or any of that. I'm going to show you a few basic tips in Photoshop for cropping and things like that and compressing. But this tutorial is not about how to edit your photography. There's other tutorials for that. So we're going to start with a basic slide, and we're going to upload to the slider a new slide. And this slider is 700 pixels tall. We recommend that all slides are roughly 2048 wide. Your admin, you can email us at support@ilgm.com and ask about your slider heights and things like that, and the recommended file sizes, and we'll work with that for you because those are actually going to be independent and individual of each different website. So now let's take a look at just adding a slide in here. So let's jump over to Photoshop. So now we have this photo here. Let's center it in the screen. It's pretty tall. It's pretty wide. It's much taller than 700 pixels wide. So your best bet is to crop it down. And let's take a look why. So right now this image is 3,340 by 2505. And if we were to try to save it, its original size, as you can see down here, is 23 megs. That would take forever to download. If we were to save it out to the web, my generic settings, default settings, is going to drop it down to 1.7 megs, which is still a pretty big photo. But that's because it's at full width. So we're going to go ahead and knock this down to 2048. So now that we're at 2048 wide, we're still taller than our 700. But when I hit enter, we just knocked a whole megabyte off of that particular photo. So it's still full height. It's now at 612K, which is still pretty high. We can come over here and click on medium and still retain excellent quality. And now we're down to 261K, but that's still really big. So the best thing for us to do here is to cancel out and crop it to a smaller size that we actually need. So let's go ahead and cancel out. And let's come over here and let's crop it down. I'm going to go ahead and hit height, width, and resolution. It already defaulted to 2048 by 800. My slide is 700 tall. I'm going to go with 800 just to give it a little bit of extra room. But look how much photo it's going to take off the top that we don't need, that it's going to hide if we go ahead and upload it anyways. But I'm going to go ahead and drag my photo down. I want my subject to be positioned properly. Okay, that looks pretty good there. So I'm going to go ahead and crop this down. All right, so there's our photo, there's our slide. Now let's go ahead and export it out. If you look down here, we immediately went from 23 megs down to 4.6. So we've got a much smaller photo already to work with. So let's go ahead and set this up to save it. So here's my default settings. I'm still at 300K. But I'm going to go ahead and hit medium, and now this is going to drop it down to 160, which is still high, but for a photo site, that's not bad. So let's go ahead and hit save, and we'll use that in a second. Now while we're in here, let's discuss adding additional photography. So as you can see here, what I have is I brought in 2 photos. I have it cropped to the size that I know what my slide's going to be. I brought in 2 photos and then put in a divider bar. And now I can use this. And when I export it out, I'm going to save it as 1. And we'll upload it as a slide. Now it's 2 photos, but it's actually going to be 1 slide when it goes up. You can do this with infographics. You can do all kinds of different stuff in the background. You can have text on one side, and we're going to talk about that in just a second. But I'm going to go ahead and crop this guy down a little bit here too, because we're going to use him here shortly on another example of a type of a slide. So let's crop this guy out, and let's go ahead and save him down. Put that on the desktop. All right, so that's all we're going to do in Photoshop. But if you're running multiple photos inside of one slide, you need to build them here in Photoshop or whatever your photo editing tool is first, and then save it as a single slide, and then we'll upload it as a slide. Okay, now that we have our slides cropped and ready to go, let me move this over the way and let me push this over here so that we can see these photos. There's one that we did, there's the other one, and here is the third one. So we've got these 3 that we're going to work with during this tutorial. So the first thing we want to do is upload a new slide. That's all we're going to do, just upload a new slide and call it good. So we're going to come over here. We're going to go ahead and click Add a New Slide. We're going to scroll down to the background. We're going to click on the photo tab, and we're going to click on add a background image. And then we're just going to drag the one that we want to use. We're going to let it upload. We're going to click upload image. We're going to click the check mark, and update. So that added the slide to the end of the existing list. So we'll come back over here and hit load. And there's our slide. So now we've successfully added a slide to the list. It's at the back, so how do we get it to the front? So we'll come back over here. We'll click our gear. Here's our 4 slides. We'll just drag this one to the top. We'll hit update. We'll hit update. And now it will be the first slide in the list. So we'll go ahead and reload, and there's our new slide. It's the first slide in the list. So let's take a look at adding another slide, the one that we created earlier with the 2 images right here, and see how that looks like. So we'll come back over here. We're going to go ahead and just change the slide. So we're going to click the first one. Scroll down to background. We're going to click on the existing slide. We're going to upload a new one, the one with the 2 birds. Drop that in there, hit upload, click, and update. So let's jump back over here. Let's hit reload. Now there's our 2 pelicans. So as you can see, adding multiple photos into one slide is pretty easy, but it needs to be done outside of the slider itself. Now let's look at some different options of the slides. So let's go back to our slide. Let's go ahead and throw our beach slide up in here. So we're going to go ahead and click on here, and we're going to select one from our library. We don't have to re-upload it. It's already there. All right, and update. Now when we load this, boom. So there's our slide back, and our page information is below, and it's all there. So option number 1, we're going to look at the rotation speed. And if you notice, there's not any buttons down at the bottom, there's no menu, there's no arrows. So let's go look at turning those on or off. So here is our slides. Here is what's called the elements. So we're going to add arrows, we're going to show controls, and we're going to hit update. So the first thing that did is it added arrows in controls so that our customers can see what slide they're on and they can scroll through them. So if I mouse over this, now I have these arrows on both sides, and I can click to go to each one. And I also have these controls down here at the bottom, so I can click and go to whichever one that I want to down here on the bottom. So those are options for you to turn on or turn off. If you want to change the speed of the slide, we'll come back over here. We'll come back over here. And we'll go to design. And we'll scroll down to the bottom where it says animation. And right now, automatic animation is on. So if your slides aren't moving, it could be that this is turned off. It defaults to 7 seconds or 7,000 milliseconds. We can speed this up to 2 milliseconds if we want. That's a little fast, but just for the sake of this tutorial, we'll do that. We'll hit reload or upload, and now reload. So there's our first slide, and as you can see now, it's hopping through each one of the slides. So you have control over how fast you want that to be. Another option would be is you don't want any animation at all and you only want one single slide. So let's come back over here. We'll come back down to animation. We'll turn that off. We'll go back to content. We'll just delete all of these slides. We don't need them to load. And we'll hit update. And then we'll hit reload. And now we have a single slide. And there's no arrows, there's no animation or anything. It's just a static image. And you'll see this a lot. And the reason we don't use the image slider is because a lot of times people will come back and say, hey, can I add another image or two up there? And it's a whole lot easier for us to just configure it for you right up front and get it ready to go. And then when you're ready, you just jump over here and you add a new slide like we did earlier. Let's take a look at some different configuration options now on how your slide can act. So when I mouse and scroll through this page, the whole photo goes up and disappears from the top. It moves with the scroll of the page. That's called static. Parallax is where the page will actually go up, but the photo won't move. So let's take a look at what that looks like. We'll jump over here. We'll go into the slide. We'll come down to the background and we'll change this option right here where it says use parallax. We'll say yes. And we're going to use true parallax. And we're just going to hit check, check, and update. I use this feature a lot. It's a really cool feature, but it's specific to what you want to do. And the first thing that you're going to notice is it got really big. And now the quality of the photo is a little off. And the reason that is because parallax needs more of the photo in order to hide all of the edges big enough to cover when the page scrolls. And what it looks like is when this page is moved up to the top, if you'll notice, the page is now covering up the top of the photo and the photo is disappearing behind it instead of moving with the page. So it's best to have a higher quality photo when doing that. And I'll show you what the higher quality photo looks like. Okay, now I've got a high-res photo uploaded. I'm going to go ahead. If you notice, it's only 2560, so I only added about 500 extra pixels, but I made it a little taller. And this is going to give the parallax more photo to work with and more room to work with and a much better quality. So we'll come back over here, hit update, and we'll come over here and hit reload it. I already reloaded it, but there it is right there. We'll let it fill, but if you'll notice now, this photo is much better than what we saw earlier because it gave the parallax more room to work with. Now, because our photo is a little bit bigger, you don't necessarily want a whole bunch of slides using parallax. This typically works best with just a single image. And you don't want to have it too heavy where it takes a long time to download. But if you notice now, the whole thing slides right over the top of the page and gives you that excellent parallax effect. So that's one of the reasons why that we run it this way. All right, now let's take a look at positioning of your subject. So right now, she is right dead in the middle of the photo, and that's a little off balance. So we would like to move her down to put a little space above her to make it look a little more pleasing, a little more balanced. And we're going to change the positioning of the photo by going to the gear, clicking on the slide. We're going to scroll down to the background, and we're going to change the background image position from center. We want it to start at the top and go down from the center. So we're going to select top, center, checkbox, check, and update. And you guys can go through and test all these on your own. We're just going to show you where these options are. So now I'm going to come back over here and I'm going to reload. And now there's more space above the top. She's down towards the bottom. This is way more balanced. It's way more pleasing to see, and it's a lot easier on the eyes. But if you have the need to move your images and stuff around, this is how you do it. Now let's take a look at some text options. We can come back over here, click the gear, click the slide. And again, you can do this all on multiple slides, but for this video, we're just going to work with the one slide. So we're going to add in, this is my title, check, check, and update. And then reload. Okay, there's my title. And you can change the font size just like you can anything else, the colors, the whole 9 yards. We're not going to cover that, We're just showing you where this text lives. So let's come back over here and let's add in a description and a button. So we're going to go ahead and click the slide. Here's our button. We're going to add in a view more info. That's the text on the button. We're going to come down here to link, and we're going to go ahead and add in a link so that the button has something to do, someplace to go. It can go off-site. It can go on your site somewhere. If you're going to go off-site, make sure you open in a new tab so you don't lose your site to the visitor. So we'll go ahead and update that. And this is what it looks like with a button. So there's our view more info button. And when we open it, it's going to open a new page. So let's go and add a description to it real quick. We don't need all that in there. Okay, now there's the description. But if you notice, it is a little challenging to read. There's two ways to add overlays on here to make it easier to read. So let's go and take a look at that. We'll come over here. We'll go to the gear. This time, we're going to go to design. We're going to go to overlay. And we use a background overlay, which covers the whole photo, or text overlay. We'll start with the text overlay. We'll go ahead and add in a solid color. You can leave it solid if you like. I personally like making it a little transparent so that you can see what's going on in the background. When it's solid like that, the visitors don't understand what's going on in the background. It makes it a little bit uneasy for them. So I like having it a little bit of transparency. So let's take a look and see what that looks like. We'll go to design. We'll go to overlay. We'll click on the color and we'll pull our transparent slider down to about 50%. Say update. So now that the visitor can see what's going on, but it's really easy to read everything that's on here. And you can do a variety of things to this. If you can make it, you can add borders, you can round the corners. I mean, you have a lot of options here. But the other option that I like better than the text is I like going with a full overlay that covers the whole image. So let's take a look at what that looks like. We'll turn this one off. We'll go to use background. We'll go to black. We'll set our transparency. This time, because we're using the whole thing, I'm going to come down to about 35%. I'll make it a little bit more transparent. Let's see what that looks like. I think it just looks better. There are design elements in photos that work really well with the text overlays, but when you're using just generic photos like this, I like to black out the whole photo. It makes it look a little better. The other thing that you can do as well is you can have this text slide over to the right, and we can drop an image over here. So let's take a look at what that looks like. Slide down. Now we're going to select image and video, and yes, it can be a video. So we're going to put our pelican in here that we had earlier. I've uploaded him right to here. So let's go ahead and stick him in here, and let's hit reload. So now there's our pelican and our text over here on the side and our background image. But she's kind of lost and washed out in here. So let's change the background into a texture instead so it's not as distracting. So what I did is I just eliminated her in Photoshop and created a background of the water. So let's take a look and see what that looks like. We'll come back over here. Let's come down to our background image. Let's change this guy out and let's upload just our texture. Okay, there's our texture. Drop it in, hit update, and hit reload. So now she's been removed. The text is easy to read. Our pelican's easy to read. And if that was a video, you would be able to click the play button and it would play the video right there. You can also not use a background at all. You can use a color or a gradient. So let's jump over here. Let's go to our slide. We're going to go ahead and remove the background. So let's get rid of the background and let's start with just a green color. We'll hit update. Let's go ahead and take out our overlay. We don't need that anymore. And hit update. That overlay would change the color to a much darker color. So now there's our green. It kind of blends in with everything, so it doesn't look very good. So let's change our color to brown. So now we have a brown color. But if we wanted to, we can turn that into a gradient. And this is a slide, so if we add another photo, let's just take a look at that. If we add another photo in here, it will rotate. See, now it's going to rotate back and forth between those. And this other one can have buttons and stuff in it as well. But let's take a look at some effects. Let's put a gradient behind here, and let's go ahead and change the photo to black and white so you can see what it looks like. So we'll start with the gradient. We'll go to the first slide. We'll come down to the background, and we'll switch to the gradient tab, and we'll add our two colors. So we'll go ahead and select these two different browns. And let's go ahead and change the direction to 135 and give it a more of a, instead of just a plain top to bottom. So our first one is the gradient. So now it's a little darker up here. Now it's a little darker up here, and it gets a little lighter down here. It's subtle, but it's enough to add a little bit of depth to that slide. Next, we're going to drop the color on the photo and turn it into black and white. Super easy. It doesn't have to be done in a photo editing tool. We can do it right here. So we're going to come down to background, and now we're going to click on design. And we're going to come down to the bottom to where it says filters, and we are going to set the saturation from 100% to 0, instant black and white. So there's our slide there, and here's our black and white slide. So now we're a complete black and white. So as you can see, there's a ton of different options. You can do all kinds of stuff with text and video all through the slide tool right here.